Welcome to yet another edition of the Road Testament by webcam again. I'm Jeff Musial. Over there in California is Josh Vietze. How you doing, man?
I'm doing alright despite the fact that it's 5 in the morning over here.
I'm sorry for doing this to you. We're actually shooting this the day of actually you guys seeing it. It is Thursday. Where's Alex, Josh?
Alex got delayed. He had a flat tire driving over here in the Gumpert, so we got tired of waiting for him, and here we are.
Okay, well today we're going to be talking about Google, and they actually had a press release that came out over the weekend. They've been test driving autonomous vehicles on public roads. So that's today on the Road Testament. So Josh, over the weekend we got this press release from Google stating that they've driven over 140,000 miles with a fleet of 7 vehicles autonomously, all by themselves. Of course, there are people inside of the cars, engineers, actually scientists from Google as well as some scientists from DARPA.
Yeah, actually that 140,000 miles was semi-autonomous with minimal input from a driver. So there were instances where the driver was controlling the car over that distance.
Yeah, well, actually, the press release said 1,000 were confirmed to be completely by themselves, was completely autonomous, right?
Correct.
Okay, all right. So Google, a company that most people associate with search engines and Gmail or whatever it may be, is starting this campaign to. The way they put it is they want to eliminate traffic fatalities. They want to improve traffic safety. Google, a company, in their mission statement says they are a company that will use technology to solve really, really big problems. Really. So they consider that traffic fatalities and traffic safety and our infrastructure to be a very big problem, and things need to be solved, and this is their solution. But Josh, it seems a little bit premature. This is something that we've all been doing, we've all heard about rather for several years. Actually, it was only this summer that Audi, and now it seems it was Google's involvement too, had a challenge to drive up Pikes Peak. They sent a TTS all the way up Pikes Peak by itself. But are we kind of jumping ahead? Is our infrastructure ready for this? Do you think it's possible?
Yeah, certainly it's possible. I mean, I've read a number of Isaac Asimov books. I'm a big sci-fi fan, so yeah, I mean, that day and age is coming. How far away are we from it? I think we're very far away. Infrastructure-wise, human psychology, I think, is not quite there yet. We're not ready for this yet. And I do think it's a big solution, a great solution for a huge problem that we have. But yeah, we're a ways away from, I think, refining this technology to the point where it's completely safe, but then also accepting it, I think, into our world.
Well, let's quickly step back and actually look at exactly what Google is doing. The technology in this car is not new technology; it's just new processes. They're using radar on the front, right?
Actually, it's LiDAR.
Well, LiDAR is up top. They're using the LiDAR that it's a 360 that pretty much the computers on board develop a 3-dimensional map a few hundred feet around all the dimensions around the car.
Right.
But they're also using radar, like parking sensors up front as well for tight quarters, I think.
Right.
And they also have 2 cameras that look far in advance that not only look for obstructions, cars, but also they look at the road pavement for the lines and the grooves to determine where the car should be.
Right.
There's also sensors on the suspension to look at a suspension travel. And then, of course, you're into the ECU. You're looking at speed, tachometer, fuel efficiency, fuel
everything
flow,
that all
that
the tech that you're talking about is all sensor-related technology. There's also the AI mind driving the car, making decisions. So, and that I think actually, that to me, that tied together with all the sensory apparatus is kind of, that is to me the most significant part.
Yes, of course, it's the brain. But you look at all this, and to hear Google is going out on public roads and doing this, they've done tests all the way from Mountain View in their headquarters through San Francisco, across the Bay Bridge, San Francisco, the Golden Gate Bridge, all the way down the Pacific Coast Highway to Santa Monica. Do you feel safe knowing that there are these cars driving themselves and you could very well be next to one?
I mean, yeah, I know they're pretty safe. They all have people sitting in them. And the cars themselves, from what I read, there's 3 ways to override the automation. There's an actual button that basically shuts the system down. And then anytime the driver touches the steering wheel or touches either of the pedals, it also disengages, just like cruise control. So, I mean, I'd like to think that while they're testing these cars, you know, the guys are paying attention. I think it raises an issue in the future of the guy who's driving to work and drinking coffee and maybe reading the paper, or actually probably more likely reading his iPad, and whether or not he's paying attention. So I think long-term safety, I don't know, you know, it's hard to say.
What about the legality of this?
Well, that's interesting too, because a lot of the laws for driving, you know, standards for vehicles already assume there's a person driving a car. So this is totally unprecedented, and you could say that because the person does have optional control over the car, there is still a human controlling the car effectively.
Of course.
But as far as legal stuff's concerned, this is totally unprecedented. I don't know how it's possible to introduce this. I think probably California is the best place to start. We know how things easily get ratified.
And Google not only has a lot of leverage over the California government, but also the United States government, so they actually the world, so they can pretty much get away with this kind of stuff. It's interesting to hear that they're doing this, because, you know, Street View was something that was unprecedented at the time. We were so shocked that they would do this. But do you really think many car manufacturers would adopt this? Of course, Audi, they've donated a car to the cause. They've got a TTS that's in the fleet. But do you really?
You and Audi is so funny. I want our viewers to know that Audi was not the only car tested doing this. The other 6 cars were Priuses. But it's interesting.
Okay. They just did that because they're tree hugging hippies.
I know. And actually, Audi is continuing along with their sort of technology advancement in infrastructure of driving in cities with their Travolution thing they did in Germany, where the car and the traffic lights are interacting. So yeah, Audi definitely is a first mover doing this. Do I think manufacturers are going to adopt this anytime soon? No, I sooner would expect to see an Android car, a Google Android powered car that they produce themselves, or they produce maybe with Audi.
That's really interesting, because back to the Audi discussion, Audi Presense preloads the brakes and preloads the suspension if it thinks you're going to crash into something. And the Audi 8 is the first vehicle ever to be fully integrated into Google and Google Earth. So when you search for stuff, you're searching on Google Earth and the Google search engine instead of, and it's connected through a cell service and a database on board.
That's cool. That is very cool.
Yeah.
Also, speaking of Street View, the guy who co-invented Street View is one of the guys who's leading up this the autonomous driving thing for Google. So cheers to him, Sebastian Thrun. He's the king.
That's really interesting. All right, I think at this point we should give both of our opinions as to what we think is going on and whether we like this or not, and then I want to chime into the audience. Personally, I think that this is a situation that can spiral out of hand. Like all technology, you don't want to abuse it. You don't want to take advantage of it, and you also want to keep your fundamentals. So when I say abuse it, I still think that people could be turning this into, you know, the whole objective is to reduce traffic and to help safety on the roads. I can see people using these autonomous vehicles if it ever came to the market. So instead of parking your car, I can see people having the car drop them off at a venue, at work, and then going into a holding pattern on the street to save on parking costs, especially in New York City. If you drive around for a few hours, it's cheaper than parking for $30. I see that as being an issue. It's kind of an abuse, and that's not really that's clogging the roads up as well as using more fuel. But also the fundamentals of driving. I feel if this starts to be accepted, people are going to forget how to drive. In America, not a lot of people know how to drive manual transmissions because the automatic is saturated in the market.
Yeah.
So that leads to problems with if someone needs to drive a manual car, they can't, and in certain emergencies, that's not good. If this was to be adopted, if cars that can drive themselves were to be adopted on our normal highways, we need to insert new rules for driving standards. So if you get an autonomous car, you should be taking your driver test every 2 years to make sure you stick with the standards of driving and that you don't get lazy. Race car drivers, their senses, the way they feel, the way they drive, it all comes down to their brain. And the reason they're so good is because they do it every day of the year.
Yeah. Well,
guys commuting every day.
Let me cut you off by saying there is certainly a much higher absorption rate of senses in one of these cars than any human could ever have. And my opinion on the subject is, I agree with some of what you said. I don't think people will put their cars into holding patterns for indefinite lengths of time. Although I'm sure somebody will be abusing that. I think this is very, very far away from being adopted. Maybe a generation or more, simply because the psychology of a human being being in a car, even being in a passenger seat. When you're in a passenger seat, you're anxious because you're not in control. And I think that will take a really long time to overcome. I do agree with you about drivers being sort of privileged into being able to drive a semi-autonomous car. Certainly, nobody should be allowed to operate a car like that without a perfectly clean driving record. Somebody who's going to be willing to be aware while behind the wheel of one of these cars. So I think we should wrap at that.
Yeah. Okay. And now at this point, I want to hear what you guys have to say out there in the interwebs. Leave your comments below. We read them. Obviously, with the show, we don't always respond to them, but it's really important that there's some kind of interaction, and your voice means more so than anything else.